playing video games, sometimes you want to be transported into a completely different world, experience an incredibly engaging story, or progress through a deep and extensive combat system. But on the other hand, sometimes you just bought it because it had Lego on the front cover. The year is 1999, so long ago that I feel uncomfortably old talking about it, but it also fills me with an uncontrollable amount of nostalgia when I think back to the game that made me reschedule my busy days of eating mud and getting Hot Wheels stuck in my nose. It is of course the year that gave us Lego Racers, which, despite what you might remember, wasn't really that good of a game. It didn't really look that good, it was criminally short, and its sequel was so difficult for me as a 4-year-old that my dad had to stop hanging out with his friends on New Year's Day to finish the game for me, as I was crying because Johnny Thunder told me I sucked at racing. But despite all of that, I loved it. And I'm pretty sure I wasn't the only one. It's with good reason. Both Lego Racers and its sequel were colorful, fun, fast-paced, and I mean, it was a Lego game. Of course every kid in the early 2000s loved it. But looking back at those games now, especially that sequel, you can't deny that these games were incredibly rough around the edges and just overall not as good as most people remember. That doesn't really matter though, because nostalgia is one hell of a powerful thing, and throughout the past 20 years many people always wished for some sort of return to the chaotic kart racing fun we've had with these games all the way back in our childhood. Well, color me surprised when earlier this year, seemingly out of nowhere, 2K was like, oh, by the way, we have this Lego racing game that's going to be released in like a month or something, whatever. Cue Lego 2K Drive, the game no one really expected to be coming, but all of us millennials had been secretly hoping for. Upon its release, it did actually look to be an exciting spiritual successor to those games that grabbed our attention 20 years ago, even though the name sounds like the developers just slapped a few words together and called it a day. But does it manage to recapture the fun races and playful aesthetic of those games? And probably more importantly, is a racing game like that still even possible in today's gaming landscape? Or will scummy business practices and an excessive focus on monetization ruin an otherwise simple children's game? I've already made a first impressions video on this game, which you can find right here, but let's find out if my initial response to the game stays unchanged now that I completed the entire thing in this sort of review on Lego 2K Drive. If there's one thing I remember most of the original Lego Racers, it's the colorful presentation, and luckily that is the first thing that catches the eye when our playable character drives into the starting area known as Turbo Acres. From here you'll start your journey throughout several themed quote-unquote biomes that together form Bricklandia, a Lego-sized world that is focused on one thing and one thing only: racing. Here, you and all the rivals you'll encounter through the story battle it out in several races that form the championship for the coveted Sky Cup. In these initial minutes with the game, our character cruises along the long stretches of highway in Turbo Acres, getting acquainted with gameplay and mechanics, all while the story unfolds through news clips from the awesome news network.
Well, how do you like that, Parker? A victory no one predicted.
I like it just fine. Thanks for asking.
Don't mention it, Parker.
Oh, too late. I already did. We're amusing.
In typical hero's journey style, there's an old mentor figure who is going to show you the ropes, and of course you have a main rival, current champion and obvious bad guy, Shadow Z.
That's me, Shadow Z! Oh, I'm gonna smash you good for being a no-name nobody who's suddenly a threat to me for no apparent reason!
If this all sounds incredibly cliche, that's because it is. And guess what? The game itself agrees with you. Lego 2K Drive is incredibly self-aware, and probably intentionally written in a way so it can make fun of itself all of the time.
That's Clutch Racington, ex-big shot driver, now charismatic winner who trains rookie racers, which is lucky for you and convenient for the story.
We smell a tutorial!
When you have something like Lego, a franchise that is as beloved with adults as it is with children, writers find themselves in a tough position where they have to make something that is appealing for both of those audiences. As I've described in my first impressions video, luckily the writers of Lego 2K Drive had a lot of Lego related material they can take inspiration from. The LEGO Movie and the Traveler's Tales games are of course the best examples. A visual presentation, an overly excited and funny way of pronouncing things to make it fun for children.
Who ate a banjo? Who did? Who ate a banjo?
While also using play on words and references that adults can appreciate.
I thought, foreclosure. It's probably something to keep my doors and windows shut, but oh, brother, it sure ain't.
These are by far some of the biggest compliments to give LEGO 2K Drive. Right from the get-go, you're bombarded with dumb jokes and a sense of charm that makes it an absolute blast to play through. Even though this hero's journey style of storytelling is as old as time itself, there's a reason why it's still being used as often as it is. It's an effective way to tell a story, it's easy to understand, and it's always rewarding. This does of course mean that there will be no surprises throughout the story whatsoever, because every story trope can be spotted from a mile away. But that doesn't matter at all in a game like LEGO 2K Drive. No one expects an earth-shattering story with deep character development and prize-winning writing in a game where you're also racing against a talking plastic horse in a pickup truck. If the game manages to make you smile a few times, it already succeeded in what it set out to do. And luckily, that's exactly what it does. Package all of that in cutscenes that look like they've been made in a similar way as the LEGO Movie, with its intentionally clunky movement and a shiny plastic finish for the LEGO models, and you have yourself something that is fun to play through while also being great to look at. Top it off with a great and varied soundtrack, as you'll hear throughout this video, and we're off to a great start with LEGO 2K Drive.
Oh my cogs, you assembled a rocket.
Nah, I don't know where that came from. Probably would have been a pretty good idea though, huh? Oh well. Anyway, here's how we're getting up there.
As I've said before, the game takes place in several semi-open world areas, each representing a different sort of theme. After leaving Turbo Acres, the journey continues to Big Butte County, a desert landscape dressed in a space theme. Here you'll race against things like pilots, astronauts and obvious humans, while seeing things like an airfield, a rocket launch site and definitely not a UFO. Then you'll make your way to Prospecto Valley, a mountainous landscape themed around mining, crime, money and cats for some reason. Again, you'll find rivals here that fit this environment, like the earlier mentioned talking horse, a cat lady and several criminals and miners. Then finally you'll reach Hansborough, which is basically Halloween if Halloween was a town. It's filled with zombies, spiders, skeletons, crazy scientists and a sick Halloween party. When making your way through the story, you're eventually able to participate in the Sky Cup Grand Prix, which can be seen as a fifth and actual final theme, but since the Sky Cup is just one track and nothing more, I personally don't count it as a separate area. All of these areas are just normal 3D landscapes, but filled with LEGO elements similar to what you see in basically every good LEGO game. But as an added detail, many of the objects you'll see throughout these areas are large real-world items, used to hammer home the fact that you are in fact playing with LEGO. In Big Butte County you'll see big house plants next to LEGO houses. In Prospecto Valley an entire corner of the map is filled with huge cat-related items. Turbo Acres has oversized gardening equipment as well as tools you'll find in a garage, etc. I personally think this is a really nice detail. On the one hand, you're still racing through a living and believable LEGO world, but on the other hand, it reminds you that you're still playing with toys, giving the game a similar feel as something like Micro Machines or Mario Kart 8's Ribbon Road. So as you can see, these areas offer a lot of variety and are, in my opinion, gorgeous and interesting to look at. The game offers a lot of environmental storytelling by means of LEGO-built structures and NPCs you'll be able to interact with. Though, to be fair, these conversations are not much more than gameplay instructions, witty one-liners or small Easter eggs. Again, the writing in this game is about as deep as an average episode of Keeping Up with the Kardashians, but I do appreciate a good conversation with a farm animal every now and then. Prospecto Valley is in my opinion the least interesting, but it still looks great. And Hansborough might have the most interesting theme, but I just like Big Butte, and I cannot lie. The biggest criticism I can think of as far as these areas go has nothing to do with what is in the game, but rather what isn't. Outside of Turbo Acres, which is obviously the smallest of the bunch and just meant as a starting area, this game only has 3 other biomes. Yes, they are pretty huge and they have a lot of things to do in them, but it does mean that races and side objectives will soon start to feel pretty similar. In comparison, the original LEGO Racers might not have open worlds, but at least it has a lot of variety as far as tracks go. But speaking of these races and objectives, the main focus in LEGO 2K Drive is of course the racing. In this game, that racing is divided into 3 categories: street racing, off-road racing and boat racing. Where many other games would split these categories up into their own specific race, LEGO 2K Drive went the Crew 2 route and made you switch between the 3 mid-race. Which means that at one point you'll be driving your incredibly obvious product placement across wide stretches of highway, while you could jump your public restroom off a waterfall just seconds later. Each race you'll mostly be battling against that race's main rival. You could of course try and race as fast as possible, but the ridiculously obvious rubber banding will make sure that every 12-second lead will be followed up by an incredibly humbling ass-kicking half a millisecond before reaching the finish line. So instead you can use items like rockets, mines and spider webs in order to keep your lead and wipe that shiny plastic smirk right off those pesky rivals' faces.
That was awesome!
If you were able to win a race, you'll be rewarded with several different things. First up, defeating the main rival gives you a checkered flag, of which you need several in order to compete in that area's Grand Brick Arena. These are by far the most exciting races, since they are, as the name gives away, huge arenas in which you have to face off against all the previous rivals at once. All while dodging obstacles, shooting rockets and switching vehicles. Maybe you're just listening to my explanation, or maybe my awful frame rate is already enough of an indication, but yes, the races in LEGO 2K Drive are absolute mayhem. If it's not because of the speed or the items that are being used by you and the opponents, then it's because of the thousands of LEGO pieces that'll fly off the cars and off the environment. It's basically like watching a unicorn puke every time you hit someone or something. The second thing you'll get for winning a race is rewards like new cars, new racers or new bricks from building and customizing your own car. Of course, we're going to talk more about customization later, but for now it's just nice to know that basically every race gives you something new and useful for later on in the game. Lastly, you'll get XP because the game also has a leveling system which goes from level 1 to 30. The higher level you are, the faster your car will be going. The more perks you can use, yes, the game also has perks, and the more variations of races you can do. That's because after reaching certain levels, you'll reach a new race class. Every race can be driven in either C, B or A class. C class is the easiest, while B and A will increase your opponent's speed and skill level, the amount of items throughout the race, and the amount of obstacles you'll encounter. While I do think it's kind of dumb that this means you basically have to complete every race 3 times, on top of the lack of variety in races we've already talked about, it is nice to see that there is at least some sort of variety in the races because the tracks are changed up in this way. It's not great, but it also isn't awful.
Get your knickers in a twist.
Outside of the races, there are a lot of side activities to do in LEGO 2K Drive. Good things first. There are several challenges you need to complete through the single player in order to progress the story. These mostly range from destroying robots and driving over clowns to saving civilians from robot cowboys and skeletons. Not a lot to say about them other than they're a fun change up in between normal races. Each area also has its own side quests, in which you have to help out several citizens. Mostly just fetch quests, but they're okay to do as well. Then there's also the world events and on-the-go events. These can be all sorts of things. From small races, to smashing your car into a wall, to jumping as far as possible. Then every world has its own collectibles, ranging from golden nuggets to spiders to whatever. So again, a lot to do, most of it is fun to do and lots of variety. All of these events and collectibles give you brick bucks, this game's currency, and XP, so that's all fine, but then you realize that there's also really stupid on-the-go events like pushing a huge egg into a pan, which is not fun at all because the game's physics are all based around speed, but not precision. Then you realize some of the time challenges, which most of them are by the way, are unnecessarily difficult when you're level 1, so you might as well skip all of them until the end of the game, because as soon as you'll reach level 30 you'll be so fast that everything is a cakewalk. But then again, why would you do these events if you don't need the XP anymore? Well, I mean, you can get some rewards other than XP from completing all of them. But do you have any idea how many of these events you have to do? But then we haven't even talked about the absolute bane of my existence. I already told you that each area has its own collectibles. And you might think, that's fine, searching for collectibles is kinda grindy, but it's doable. But do you have any idea how many fucking collectibles this game has? The game acts as if it's filled with these interesting tidbits around every corner, but in reality you'll be desperately searching for 200 golden trinkets per area without any sort of indication where they are, while getting Vietnam flashbacks of the Riddler trophies in the Arkham series. I can wholeheartedly tell you that 100%ing this game is not worth it at all. And how do I know that? Because I did that. All of that. And the rewards range from XP I don't need anymore, to bricks I will never use, to characters more bland than the base character in Fortnite. The only thing you can still do after that? Mowing the lawn. At least by doing everything, you now saved up a lot of money in order to go to the garage, build yourself a great looking car, or buy cool stuff from the in-game shop. Well... Throughout the game you'll unlock several new cars and characters, ranging from incredibly cool to incredibly ridiculous. Some are of course better than others, but all in all, most of the creations you'll unlock in the game are prettier than anything I could ever make myself. But that doesn't change the fact that I tried my very best, because my goodness, the customization in LEGO 2K Drive is amazing. Starting off with a very good explanation, which basically grants you your first creation already, you can then make your own vehicles with all the LEGO pieces you've earned and bought up to that point. This is basically some of the best LEGO building that you ever have been able to do in a video game. Taking everything you could do in the original LEGO Racers, but cranking it up to 11. Not only has the range of LEGO bricks been expanded upon in the past 20 years, but also the amount of colors you can choose from, the sounds your car can make, the way the car handles, and the effect your car needs to have can all be customized. Then you can use it for yourself throughout the game, but you can also share it with others in the Creators Hub. Ladies and gentlemen, the Creators Hub is like walking into a LEGO store with a limitless credit card. Not only do you find a wide variety of creations here, ranging from recreations of actual LEGO sets in real life to the most unique, ridiculous and beautiful vehicles, but it's also all for free. Just give the ones you like a thumbs up for the creator and download it all for yourself. Yes, you can get several McLarens from simply playing the game, but maybe I want a Testarossa. Maybe I want Rocket Racer's car from the OG game. Maybe I want to sail the open seas on a Game Boy Color. Everything here is possible, and the creations here are incredible. It even inspired me to recreate my own favorite vehicle from LEGO Racers.
You're in the lead! Well played!
Unfortunately, this same amount of depth cannot be found in the character creator. Even the game from 1999 had a more detailed character creator, where you could change up every body part separately. But unfortunately, here you can only change up full minifigs as a whole. Not a deal breaker, but it's kind of a disappointment, especially because the car customization is so elaborate. So, let's say you finished the entire single player, you've unlocked everything, you've created all the vehicles you wanted to create. What now? Well, the game also has an online multiplayer. In its core, this is just as much fun as the single player. You challenge both strangers and your own friends in customized championships made up of tracks you've also did in the single player. One of the best things is that you can even bring your own creations into the multiplayer, so you can beat 5-year-olds on the internet in the knowledge that you did it with something you made yourself. And yes, I am allowed to be proud of that. To sum it up quickly, this is a lot of fun and even more chaotic than the single player. Trying to beat other people around the world is a much bigger challenge than beating the mostly brain-dead NPCs the game throws at you otherwise. And it's kind of refreshing to race opponents that don't get automatically slingshotted to first place as soon as the game decides you've been leading the pack for too long. The multiplayer also lets you do the mini games you were able to do in the single player, but it becomes more of a battle to get the highest score of all your opponents, which honestly makes it even better here than in the single player. After release, the developers also added Brick Brawl, which is basically just a huge fighting arena in which you have to destroy your opponents in order to claim victory. I can see this having a lot of potential for other people, but personally I became bored rather quickly. I don't really know if that's due to the fact that the arenas are kind of bland visually. The items are the same as in any other race, which means that you're basically just doing the same as in any other race, but without the racing. Or because I was only able to find one person who was playing this game mode as well, which made the whole game pretty uninteresting.
Bullseye.
And unfortunately, that is the biggest problem with this multiplayer. Sales numbers were pretty decent for this game, but according to Steam, even at its peak, the player base reached only 1,000 players concurrently. Let alone that when you play right now, it's almost impossible to find anyone to play against, even though I've been trying to find matches over the course of 4 days. So in conclusion, there's fun to be had in the multiplayer, but I wouldn't get too attached to it. Which is an incredibly weird thing to say about a live service game. But that brings us to the final point. Let me just start off by saying that LEGO 2K Drive might be one of the most overpriced games ever. Sure, it has good gameplay, a fun presentation and a pretty art style, but that doesn't justify the €60 price tag at launch. A game like this, which even when fully 100%ing doesn't reach the 30-hour mark, is just not worth such a ridiculous amount of money. The more reasonable price tag of around €30 it has right now seems more like what it should have cost from the get-go. But as I've described in more detail in my first impressions video, that's not even where the madness stops. The more complete versions of the game known as the Awesome Edition and the Awesome Rivals Editions will still cost you nearly €100 in comparison to the even more insane €120 it cost at launch. Needless to say, you shouldn't buy it, but just to paint a picture, what do you get for that money? Access to the Year 1 Drive Pass, which is decent, but keep in mind that the Driver's Pass is filled with items and characters you really don't need, and filled with cars you can basically make yourself and have already been made by other people, which of course you can get for free in the Creators Hub. You do get some unique vehicles, but nothing that is even close to be worth this price tag. You also get 550 coins, which is this game's currency outside of brick bucks that you can only buy with real money. But then again, you can use these coins to get more brick bucks, which will then only buy you more stuff from the in-game shop, which is just not worth it. Most cars in the shop are more ugly than the ones you get for free in the Creators Hub or the ones you've already earned in the single player. Also, everything here is either incredibly overpriced or the game just doesn't let you earn enough money throughout its playtime to probably make sure that younger players will quickly feel the need to buy some currency with real money. Even after completing the entire game, the total amount of money I had was less than 200,000 brick bucks, which is what, like 15 cars you can buy? That's half of the cars you earn by just playing the game, and 1 million cars less than what you can get for free in the Creators Hub. As I've said before, it blows my mind that even after more than 20 years, the original LEGO Racers is still remembered by me and many others as an incredibly fun and vibrant game with a lot of character, but most of all with a lot of potential to still do well in between other kart racing franchises that managed to survive in the past 2 decades. I was very excited by the news that LEGO 2K Drive would release, and after completing it, it really does feel like a spiritual successor to that original 1999 game. The game looks beautiful, the driving mechanics can easily compete with other kart racers, and the overall charm that has become a staple for LEGO games also made its way into this one. Not an overly long and elaborate story, no overly complicated gameplay, not graphics that match real life, just a fun arcade racing game with a lot of character. On the other hand, it has that sort of depth exactly at the place where you want it in a LEGO game, in the building. It's by far one of the best aspects of this game, and outside of racing, it's great to lose track of time while designing your own vehicles or to look through other people's creations. If LEGO 2K Drive was nothing more and nothing less than that, while also being sold for 20 to 30 bucks, then the review would stop right here and I'd recommend it to everyone. But unfortunately, the game's short runtime is artificially lengthened by repeating races over and over again, way too many uninteresting side activities in between a few fun ones, and an ungodly amount of collectibles that aren't rewarding to collect. Granted, playing through the story is fun for as long as it lasts, but finishing the game all the way up to 100% feels like an uninteresting slogfest with constantly repeating gameplay. The fun you will have in the initial hours with the game can be prolonged in the multiplayer, but only if you're still able to find people to play against. But the biggest setback is that LEGO 2K Drive could have just been a nice little 20+ hour kart racer with a decent multiplayer, but it had to be poured into yet another live service model in order to make people spend an insane amount of money on digital versions of children's toys. There is no incentive to even get the Drive Pass, since all the fun you can possibly have with the game stays within the parts where you don't have to pay for anything other than the base game. Probably sooner rather than later, the multiplayer will be as empty as the promises surrounding such a scummy business practice, so please, if you really want to play LEGO 2K Drive, don't spend any more money than you have to. Thanks for watching. As always, I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I would really like to know what other people think of LEGO 2K Drive. I want to give a special thanks to the people who made the cars that I used in this video. You can find all of them in the Creators Hub of the game, and you can also find the cars that I made there, if you're interested in that sort of thing. For now, I just hope to see you in the next video. Bye!